the original defensive monolith. This type carries with it natural bulk that allows it to shrug off damage from most attacks. It isn't without its weaknesses, though. Broken down by raging waters, shattered by steel, consumed by the ground below, when hardness isn't enough, this type crumbles. This is the rock type. Hey guys, it's Elogee. I'm here for day 2 of the 12 days of Pokemon typings. I'm joined by Pockety.
It's Pockety.
Today we'll be going over 2 types, the first type of which is going to be rock.
All right, well, I know you're going to be very excited to talk about the rock type, so why don't you start us off? Who is your favorite of the rock types?
Well, it was kind of hard to narrow down, but ultimately I had to go with Tyranitar. I love everything about this. Like, back when Gen 2 came out, Tyranitar was, like the name suggests, a pseudo-legendary. Like, it was hard to find. Like, even though I'm
pretty sure the name suggests that it's my mon, but...
True. Tyranitar, I get it. I see what you did.
Shout out to all of the ones that you've nicknamed and Ranitar.
But as I was saying, it was hard to find Larvitar, and like it never occurred to me that it would evolve into such a monster. Like, Tyranitar is a monster. It is phenomenal competitively and lore-wise, and like non-competitively wise. You know, it's great too. Like, it looks amazing. It has a fantastic mega evolution that makes it even better. It's got great stats, and you know, I just don't really have anything bad to say about it. The worst thing I could say is its lackluster speed, but it has ways to circumvent that. So yeah, I really like Tyranitar. I don't really have anything bad to say about it. Also, the 4 times fighting weakness, but we don't talk about that. What about you? What's your favorite rock type?
Well, first I want to talk more about Tyranitar.
Okay.
So Tyranitar is really cool mon. It is actually one of the mons in my honorable mention for my favorites. Because it has my name in it, which is cool, and it's also cool, which is cool. And in my first ever draft league, when I was part of the PBF, I forgot, it's been so many years. But yeah, I got to join that, and the first time I got to draft a team, and I drafted Tyranitar, Mega Tyranitar, and I had Excadrill, and the 2 of them just, they wreck some people. So I always like Tyranitar. It's real cool. I wish I had a cooler shiny color, because its shiny's not that cool, but that's about the only thing I could say about it. So yeah.
Okay.
But since you did already ask for my favorite rock type, so this one was one of the easiest ones in preparing for these videos. Mine's Rhyperior. For me, I think it's like the ultimate rock type, not in terms of like the best to use in competitive battling, but just like the cool, like, epitome of rocks. I always liked Rhydon. From Gen 1, it was my favorite rock type. And even though like it was never available, like Gen 1, you couldn't get it until the Safari Zone, and it evolved so late, and it like didn't get good moves, but I didn't care. It was the one I thought was the coolest. Even in the anime, when you could just aim the electric attack for its horn and it would kill it, I still thought it was the coolest. And I would always force myself to use one. Even in the replays, when I would play Leaf Green, I would always force myself to use one, even though it didn't really help in-game because it took so long to get it and so late. But Rhyperior came along, and that was just my shit. And it is just power. It's dual type, but I just see rock. And, what's that? Rock Wrecker?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, yeah, they're like, no, Rhyperior just needs a bigger rock, a rocker move. I've tried using, I feel like back in the day of like Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, I like trained one, and I think it had rock polish. Maybe that was a TM back then, I think.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so I think I did like adamant rock polish, and who knows? I mean, I'm sure it was a terrible everything. It wasn't Ivy bred. It was probably, back then the big thing was just EVing anything at all. So I'm sure it was just random, like, oh, I have an adamant one. Now let's EV train it. And then that means it's perfect. But yeah, I always I always love Rhydon and Rhyperior, so that's my one. So, what do you think of Rhyperior?
Well, when it came out, I didn't really like it just because I was team Golem, team Golem over team Rhydon, and I just felt like Rhyperior completely eclipsed what made Golem even remotely usable. And, like, I hated its typing, just like how good it was. Solid rock, that made it so much bulkier than it had any right to be. Like, I couldn't kill it like with anything. I remember we battled one time in Gen 4. You had a Rhyperior, I had an Articuno, and I only 1v1'd it because you missed Stone Edge twice. but we should not talk about that. So aside from that, I have used Rhyperior competitively a few times, and I've grown to actually like it now. So while it's not in my favorites, I definitely like it. I've grown to like it. So yeah, I agree with your decision.
Thank you.
You're welcome. As far as we both kind of mentioned each other's honorable mentions. For my honorable mention is Golem, the original Golem, not Alolan Golem or Alolan. The reason for this, the reason for this is because back in aforementioned my silver playthrough, I had a Golem. I don't remember how it came to be in my party, but I know I had one for the longest time. The story is as old as time, but I had it in my team till level 98, not knowing how to evolve it. Finally, my cousin, the legendary Pockety, offered to evolve it for me by trading. So once it became Golem, it was like the front of my team. Like, it was the badass that never died to anything until Ty brought out the Suicune, but we're not going to talk about that. Yeah, Golem, it's been my favorite for a while until I really started getting into competitive and I realized how good Tyranitar was. My feelings for Golem kind of faded, but it's still there in my memory. So yeah, Golem is my only honorable mention.
I was very surprised that your favorite wasn't Golem. I mean, Hacker with Earthquake, Rock Throw?
Earthquake, Rock Throw, Fire Punch, and Magnitude.
Yeah, I mean, come on, Rock Throw. So yeah, I was definitely surprised that wasn't your favorite, but I'm glad I got an honorable mention. We mentioned one of my honorable mentions with Tyranitar. Oh well, I guess did you think Rhyperior was going to be my choice?
I forgot about Rhyperior actually, but now that you mention it, yeah, I can definitely see it.
So I'm guessing that my two other honorable mentions were probably the ones you thought of, which are Aerodactyl, because it's speed, which we know is my thing.
Yes.
If only it just had better moves, but I've always loved Aerodactyl, or Regirock, which the Reggie trio is my favorite of all the trios, and Regirock is my favorite of the Reggie trio. So of course he has to be in there. I again wish they could be better, but I really like them.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely expected Aero, and now that you mention it, I can definitely see Regirock also, and Tyranitar, I know you like that as well, so yeah, I think we understand each other's honorable mentions.
Definitely. So what are your overall thoughts of the rock type?
Probably the worst type competitively. A lot of the mons themselves are top heavy, way too slow, way too susceptible to special attacks, especially like water grass. There are also plenty of other weaknesses like fighting, steel. For a type that's supposed to be defensive, it really got eclipsed when steel type came to be, and it's kind of sad that they haven't done something to make it stand out more. But I still like rock type it's just like real visceral, and I like it. What about you?
Well, I mean, they've tried to do things to make up for the fact that they tried to say, like, well, rock's not as good, we're making steel, and it's just going to be better rock. Because, yeah, I mean, for being a defensive type and then being tied for the most weaknesses that any type has. But it's really good offensive. And, they gave it rocks. They gave it like, oh, if Sandstorm is up, you have boosted Spadef. But, yeah, I agree that they definitely, when Steel came around, they're like, we don't care about rock anymore. But I like rock type. I mean, I don't know how we've got this far into it and not talked about stealth rocks. That's one thing I wish was a little more exclusive to rock types. I feel like that would make rock types better if not everyone could use their move. You know, it's the same kind of idea as like toxic. Not every mod should have it, and they don't anymore, so that's cool.
Yeah, I can see that.
Anything else you have to say about rocks?
No, that's all I have to say for rock. So it's time to switch on over to the second half of this episode. The earth is alive. When the foundation beneath you turns against you, unless you can fly or levitate, you have no choice but to submit to its mercy. The ground type presents itself. And this is going to be, of course, the ground type. So why don't you start with your favorite ground type Pokemon?
All right, well, I think that you probably know who this is going to be. My favorite ground type is Nidoking. I've used it since my very first playthroughs of Red, Blue, and Yellow. I would consistently, catch on Route 2 a Nidoran male in Mount Moon, always in Mount Moon. I don't know how. I always had the same amount of EXP always, but it was in Mount Moon. It was to the far right of the first room you enter. That is always where my Nidoran male would evolve. And then 2 seconds later, I pick up the Moonstone, and it is now a Nidoking already. I think Nidorino was on my team for less than 30 steps in the game. And so, I had that level 16 Nidoking in all of my Red, Blue, Yellow playthroughs. I think Yellow, but definitely Red and Blue. And, it has all the coverage back then, not having... I don't know. It had Blizzard, Fire Blast, Thunder, and Earthquake, aka the best move of any generation ever. And then Nidoking kind of fell off the wayside a bit for me. And then X and Y came around, and I started using it again. And, hidden abilities and sheer force and life orb. And, I always really thought of it, especially Gen 1. It was ground type, and it was with the coverage, it was just too good that they had to do something to make it worse. And back then that meant give it the poison type, because that did nothing but bad for it. That made it weak to ground and earthquake, and it made it weak to psychics. So now in X and Y, when I'm starting to use it again, psychic type doesn't just mean bad things. Now you have actual psychic moves poison type, and you have poison moves that can actually hit things super effectively that you care about, and you can resist the new fairy type that's around. So, it is poison type, and I appreciate that, but back then, it was really just my ground type. So, what are your thoughts on Nidoking?
Well, I wasn't expecting that as your favorite, but I definitely see it. Now that you mention it, there's definitely other things that I was expecting, which will probably be in your honorable mentions. But I agree with not Nidoking being top of your list. I like it too. I'm more of a Nido Queen preferer. So, but Nidoking definitely the king. So
I prefer the men. So.
So, that just threw me all the way off.
All right, well, on that note, who's your favorite ground type?
Okay, for me, I got, again, this was difficult to decide, but ultimately, I just went with Mamoswine, because when it came out, it was more so your thing, so I never really paid attention to it, but as time went on, I started to, really like it, because when it first came out, its best ice attack, physical ice attack, was Ice Fang. It did not have access to Icicle Crash, so it didn't really have a good ice attack, so I didn't really consider it viable, but as it became more viable, I started to pay attention to it and realized I really liked it. It's really strong, has very strong earthquakes, and of course has great ice stab as well. And I just feel disappointed in myself that I overlooked it for as long as I did, because now I can't imagine ever battling without it, because I've used it for so much, and I really enjoy Mamoswine. What do you have to say about that?
I mean, I don't know anyone who doesn't like Mammothine. Like, it's got cool coverage. It can be Life Orb, it can be Bandit. It has priority. We know I love fast things. It has, it has a coverage. It has Stealth Rocks, Focus Sash. I know you like to be real weird with it and give it that. What's that special ice move that's super effective against water?
Freeze dry.
Yeah, you're all about the freeze dry mixed Mammo craziness. But yeah, I mean, everybody loves Mammothine. So yeah, so who are your honorable mentions then? Who did Mammothine beat out for the ground typing?
Once again, shoutouts to Golem, shoutouts to Hacker. Golem was my favorite rock and ground type at one point, but it just got surpassed by these two types, which I've used so much competitively that they just usurped Golem's position as favorite ground type. But shoutouts Golem. Everything I said about it still holds true. And then also honorable mention is Seismitoad, a mon that I didn't really pay attention to until 6th gen, which I really started to like it. Now it's actually kind of the best it's ever been because, competitive wise, just because circumstances. But yeah, Seismitoad, it's just weird, like in a good way. I really like it. I don't know how to explain it. What do you have to say? Like, maybe you can explain it? I don't know.
I didn't even know you liked Seismitoad at all. So that was not expected. You say you didn't like it until Gen 6, but did you even ever play Gen 5?
I did.
After Gen 6 came out?
I used it in game, yeah. After Gen 6 came out, you're right.
Okay, so you basically didn't know it until Gen 6.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, that one was surprising. Obviously, Hacker was not surprising. But for my honorable mentions, and I don't know, I guess you'll have to tell me. I'm surprised that one that's on my honorable mentions wasn't on yours. So I'll start with that one, Gliscor. Gliscor, real cool mon in both the anime, power in game. I'm sure there are many clips of battles with Gliscor doing all the things. I remember you picked it like first overall in a draft league and everyone was giving you crap about it, if I'm remembering correctly. And then the first week you like set up 6-0'd with it or some nonsense.
Yep.
So that's if I'm remembering right, then that can be the video playing right now. If our editor can make that happen.
He will.
My other honorable mentions though are Donphan, because XYUU was my jam, and I along with Nidoking, who I used, or who is my favorite ground, Donphan was another one that I consistently had on my team. Just rapid spin and ice shard for speed and stuff. So that was always a mon. Setting up the rocks, having sturdy. And then the other honorable mention that I included was Crocodile. Just always a favorite, part of my favorite game in Pokemon Black. And I used it pretty much every playthrough that I had because you always run into that, the baby form, and Sandile. And you have to use it. It has cool abilities. Doesn't matter if it's Intimidate or Moxie. You're like, yeah, I want to use that still. And I always seemed to, every time I caught it, I'd always seem to have a good nature too. And I don't know why in game that matters to me so much, but when I catch something, I'm like, oh, that's a good nature for it. I always end up using it, so I always use one. And yeah, so what are your thoughts on my honorable mentions?
Well, I can definitely, like you said, for Gliscor, like I've just only started using it so recently, so that's why I haven't had that bond with it. It's definitely cool. Same with the other one you mentioned, Crocodile. Definitely understand why both of those are in your honorable mentions. I was expecting Excadrill to be either your favorite or your honorable mention, but it was neither, so that's a little confusing for me.
Well, maybe Excadrill shows up later. Who knows?
Maybe. Okay, so there's that. What do you have to say about the type itself?
I mean, you can't talk about the ground type without talking about Earthquake. From Gen 1, it's probably the only thing that hasn't been power crept in the entire game. It is still the best move that there is. I mean, its coverage is still amazing. It hasn't lost anything. That perfect accuracy, the good power. Like, you think back to anything back then, and even the things that are still relevant had to be buffed themselves to stay relevant. Think Dragonite with multi-scale, Mewtwo with Mega Evolution, but Earthquake, untouched. And that is kind of, I associate earthquake and ground types. And so ground type having that immunity to electric is a cool thing. And I like ground types. I wish there were more fast ones because I like speed, but those are my thoughts.
Okay, well, I don't really associate earthquake with ground types, as much as you do, because earthquake is a TM, and it's like you mentioned for stealth rock, it's widely distributed, so I don't have that inherent connection. What you mentioned about electric types, though, the immunity to electric types, that's what really does it for me for ground types. Having that immunity to volt switch is incredible, or just electric in general. Unfortunate that it also has a type that is immune to it in flying type as well as levitating mons, but overall ground type is definitely great. I don't really have anything bad to say about it, and I don't really have anything else to say about it. It's just a good type. And with that, I believe we will conclude, unless Pockety has anything more to say.
Pound down.
Ground pound. Okay. So I hope you guys enjoyed this day 2 of the 12 days of Pokemon types, and look forward to day 3. So until then, thank you guys for watching.
See you guys soon.